You know, they love stories in our country. So that's always the first favored plot that we have.
I am working on a article now on Bollywood filmmaking.
Uh-huh.
I just have to rewatch a couple of the films and then I can finish writing the article.
Oh, I'd
You know,
love to read.
yeah, but I like stuff like Ram Leela, NH10, and Three
Uh-huh.
Idiots and the like. Okay, so let's get started with the
Okay.
screenwriting class. So I'm Michael
Yeah.
Karp. This will take about 70 minutes for the class.
Mhm.
Let me share with you who I am. So this is my IMDb
Mhm.
listing of the many films that I've worked on. So I used to be a camera operator and a director of photography.
Mhm.
And now I do visual effects since 2000. And here's some of my cinematography and photography and lighting work. Okay. So before I forget, there's a book that can be useful. There's a book that can be useful called Save the Cat. So you can get this on Kindle, but this will talk about many of the principles that we're covering here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 4 elements that make up a film. Let me bring up the list here. You might have trouble reading it, but I will read it to you. So when you make a film, you generally want to do 4 things. You want to make a film about a relationship forming or ending between 2 or more vertebrates. And vertebrate just means a animal with a backbone. So it's not like someone's relationship with their computer. Make a film about a secret. Make a film about a clash of cultures or ideas, and make a film that makes the audience cry. So let's talk about Titanic. In Titanic.
Michael?
Yes.
Are you recording? Just wanted to remind you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so okay, Sanjeev's not there, but
can I request like everyone to mute the microphone so like background noise is coming? So everyone can mute and just.
I have a little table fan that's making noise. Is it disturbing everyone?
Yeah, when you have questions, like you can unmute and.
Yeah, but I think Michael wants me to stay unmuted.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
so Sanjeev, let me know when you're ready to go.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Okay, so in Titanic, so the first thing that you do when you make a film or you write a script is you make a film about a relationship forming or ending between 2 or more people or animals, because there's some films that have really great stories about people's relationship with animals, such as A Dog's Purpose or Hachi, A Dog's Tale. So, so what relationships are forming or ending in Titanic?
The one between Rose and Leonardo. What was his name?
Jack Dawson.
Yeah, Jack Dawson. That was the primary one, from what I remember, because it's been a while since I saw the film.
So the relationship between Rose and her fiance is ending.
Right.
Okay, because she doesn't like him. Also, her relationship with her mother is ending because her mother is trying to get her into a marriage with a man she despises because they're broke.
Right.
Also, there's a relationship between the treasure hunter, Bill Paxton, and Old Rose. And also the relationship between Old Rose and her granddaughter changes because granddaughter, who's played by Susie Amos, doesn't know that her grandmother was on the Titanic. So there's a lot of relationships forming or ending. So we'll talk about your conversation with a god pretty soon. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is you want to make a film about a secret. So are there any secrets in Titanic?
Right.
So I'm going to give a list of the secrets. First of all, Rose is broke. Rose is unhappy with her fiance, Cal. Rose attempted suicide. The people on the ship think that she just accidentally fell over, but she actually attempted suicide. Where is the diamond? The treasure hunters.
Under the sea.
Well, we don't know that.
Okay.
Okay. So the diamond was in the safe, and then we only find out later that it's under the sea. But even when they see, because the treasure hunter, he sees the drawing of the diamond around Rose's neck. So just the diamond is a big secret. Another secret is that the ship is sailing too fast. Another secret is that there's icebergs dead ahead. Another secret is there are not enough lifeboats.
Right.
Another secret is the ship is sinking. Another secret is, who is that woman in the drawing? You know, the drawing of Rose that Jack drew with the diamond. Another secret is, where is Jack being held prisoner below decks? There's a policeman played by an actor named Warner. Another secret is that Jack did not actually steal the diamond, but is the victim of Cal's nefarious plot. Another secret is that Rose's granddaughter, Lizzie, does not know who her mother really is, a Titanic survivor and a woman with a rich love life. Another secret is that Rose was a hottie with a past. So Lizzie and the treasure hunter don't really know what Rose's life was when she was young.
Right.
Now, the biggest secret in Titanic is that Rose's spirit is a secret from herself. She doesn't know who she is.
Right.
So what's really amazing in Titanic is that at the beginning of the film, Rose is broke. She's suicidal. I'm sorry, she's broke. She has no one to love. And she's suicidal. And at the end of the film, which is a couple days later, she's broke, she has no one to love, and she's filled with life. That's called transcendence. That's called character arc. That's called transformation. So at the end of the film, everything's the same, but nothing's the same. She's a different human being. She can't go back to her failures in the past.
Right.
So another thing that almost all films do is you make a film about a clash of cultures or ideas. So what are the clashes of cultures or ideas in Titanic?
Wouldn't it be more about class clashes? Like her mother wants her to marry well, and then she wants to follow her heart. So that's conflict?
Correct. So there's a feminist thing going on. There's a class conflict with rich versus poor, because the people in the first class are in a very different world. So so what happens is that Rose's father was rich, and then he blew all the money, and so now they're poor. So her mother doesn't want to be working in a factory. She wants Rose to marry someone rich. So that's the only path that she thinks is even possible. What happens is that Rose is still broke at the end of the film because she walks away, she hides from Cal, and she changes her last name to Dawson, and she does extremely well in life. So she transcends the narrow perspectives of 1912. There's another clash of cultures or ideas in Titanic, which is an excessive trust in technology. So everyone says this is an unsinkable ship. So Jim Cameron, the writer-director of this film, who, I worked for him on staff for 6 years at Digital Domain and more than that on other shows. So he's a big tech head. So but he does know the limits of technology. Everyone should understand that technology is not perfect. One thing that's sort of funny about Jim Cameron is he does this in Paradox, is he's actually one of the best writers of love stories ever, which is sort of ironic because he's been married 6 times.
Wow.
So only his final marriage, so his final marriage is to Susie Amos, who's in Titanic. She plays the granddaughter. And so they've been married for 20 years. So as we say, the 6th time's the charm with Jim, as far as marriages. So the final thing that you want, that not all films do, but the really good ones do, is you want to make a film that makes the audience cry.
Right.
So which films make the audience cry?
Whenever there's a tragic ending.
Whenever there's what?
When there's a tragic outcome of the action, or there's a loss of life, or there's a loss of a loved one, is when you have the tragedy.
Now, there are endings that make the audience cry with joy. For example, the ending of Sound of Music is a very famous, and you cry with happiness.
Right.
Bridges of Madison County has a very bittersweet ending. The Notebook has a very mainly happy ending, but it's a little bittersweet because they die. But of course, everyone dies, but ultimately, the Notebook has a happy ending. So making a film that makes the audience cry is a really fantastic thing. So we're going to talk about Sangeeta's idea about a character talking to an Indian god. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to mention a couple of things. So films are about the journey from purgatory to hell to heaven. Actually, let me get back to that. So in your eye, so there are films where people talk to gods. Like there was a series of movies called Oh God, You Devil. And then an interesting variation of that is there's a film where Brad Pitt plays the devil. So instead of people talking to God, they're talking to the devil, but the devil doesn't really know that much about life anyway. So in your thing with a character talking to an Indian god, first of all, there's going to be a relationship forming or ending between the god and the human. Okay. And so there's many different types of relationships. There's romantic relationships, there's father-daughter. So the question is, how is this relationship forming and what's the point?
So actually in this book, it's episodic and it's from hallucinations. So there's no standard sort of long-term relationship happening between the god and the woman. But because Tamanna's a writer and she experiences 9/11 as a dark night of the soul. So she leaves New York and she leaves a commercial job as a lifestyle magazine to come to her roots, to come back to India where she's coming with spiritual questions. And what happens is as she's on this journey, moving into script writing for a movie, she starts having these hallucinatory interviews with goddesses and gods. Now in India, there are loads of them. So it's not just one god or one goddess. We have a whole pantheon of them, which you must be aware of. So it becomes very magical because a lot of her relationship questions she puts to the women, like the female goddesses, and a lot of her other questions she puts to the male gods about fidelity. So we've got complex mythical figures like Krishna is associated with the war of the Mahabharata. He's at the same time the ideal lover, okay, because he had all these women who adored him. And then he's also representative of the beauty of human existence. So there are many levels to each of these gods and goddesses. But I made it just a motive in the novel. So between all her real world experiences in Bombay, every now and then she's encountering a mental conversation, a mental encounter with a god or a goddess.
Okay, so by the way, there's another film where the character talks to God, which is called Steam Bath, which came out about 30 or 40 years ago. And it takes place in a steam bath, and Bill Bixby, the janitor, is actually the janitor. The god is actually the janitor, the steam bath attendant. Okay, so now there's basically 2 types of religion. There's monotheistic and polytheistic. So in Christianity, oh, there's still a lot of noise on the line there, but
That's my fan. Sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
So in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and perhaps in Zoroastrians, it's monotheistic. Okay, so the conversation with God is a little simple that way. So Christianity expands it because there's actually a Trinity, but you know, Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. But we'll leave that out. So then, so you have a polytheistic situation in Greek mythology and in Hinduism and its offshoots. So in a way, it's very good for a TV series to be polytheistic.
Right.
Okay, because you've got many different relationships that can form. Also, before I forget, there was a very incredible TV series around 2002 called Battlestar Galactica.
I'll write this down.
Stunning miniseries that went show that went for about 5 years. And what happens is there's humans and there's robots. The robots they created, and the robots are androids. They look just like humans. So the conflict in this is that the robots are monotheistic and the humans are polytheistic. And the robots think that the humans are blasphemous for being polytheistic. The humans actually have it sort of based like the Greek gods. And so they decide to, in the first episode, drop nuclear bombs and kill 98% of all the humans in the galaxy. Now, the conflict they have is that even though the robots hate the humans, they also really like having sex with the humans.
Okay.
Which creates a very interesting conflict because they're busy falling in love with these people they consider blasphemous. So needless to say, Battlestar Galactica is absolutely incredible. It's a classic. Now, there was an original one in the 1980s, so you can ignore that one. This is a remake of the original, but the remake is light years ahead of the original. So that has relations forming or ending. There's many secrets. It's a clash of cultures and ideas. And
Where can you see it? Is it on Netflix?
It will be available streaming somewhere or on DVD. It was extremely popular. When I saw it was, I can't remember where it was, but it was from Universal. Okay, so so in the relationship of your protagonist, so your protagonist means your hero. So in the protagonist relationship with the hero, and very important thing, flaws are the fuel for the plot. So that means that your protagonist always has to have flaws. Right. If your protagonist doesn't have a flaw, you don't have a movie. You have nothing, actually. Now, if your protagonist has a large number of flaws, then they're called an anti-hero. But an anti-hero is still a hero. But if you look at so the hero in Titanic, she's got flaws. First of all, she's a nice girl, but she just attempted suicide, which is completely unnecessary because all she had to do was walk away. Right. So cinema is the art of revealing the secrets of the universe to the audience. And so...
Sorry.
So each film will have a message. Another thing, before I forget, is that love triangles are very interesting and powerful. So if you just have two characters, there's only one interaction. But if you've got three characters, you've got 2 to the 3rd power. So Titanic, yes.
Yeah. In my novel, there is a love triangle.
But there's many different types of triangles. So for example, in Titanic, there's a love triangle between Rose, Jack, and Cal. In many, let's say you've got a woman with a child and she's widowed and then she remarries. So there's a love triangle between the daughter and her new stepfather. So when I talk about love triangles, any sort of triangle is inherently interesting, romantic or non-romantic. And so when you're talking about the conversations with the goddess, you can have triangles. As a matter of fact, in Greek mythology, the different gods and goddesses will be working at cross purposes. So you could have the humans. So, for example, one important interaction between humans and gods is with Prometheus in Greek mythology. So Prometheus wants to give the gift of fire to the humans, and the other gods think that's a really bad idea, so they tie him up and they have the birds eat him or something like that. Okay, so there's a triangle, and there was actually the woman who wrote Frankenstein, her name's Mary Shelley. Her husband was a famous poet, and he wrote a book called Prometheus Unbound. So, so each time your protagonist is talking to the god or goddess, what is the clash of cultures or ideas that they're dealing with?
So there are the conflicts of modern day anxieties that a young single woman is dealing with. There is a spiritual social crisis from 9/11, like nothing is certain anymore. And everything that she assumed when she was growing up had values is now looking very watered down. Okay, so whether it's falling in love, whether it's the idea of being married, committed, then the fact that she's an Indian living in New York, dealing with a cultural discrepancy between what she grew up with and what she sees happening around. Then there's materialism that she's trying to struggle with. So when she comes to India, she's hoping to find a higher way of living, a higher perspective, a richer field of knowledge and a richer vibration. And then she comes across the fact that Bombay is imitative of the West, hugely imitative. So when she's hitting all these crises of faith, is when she summons the energy of a different god or a different goddess to get answers to modern questions. So it's not so much the clash, but it's the fact that she as a writer has the courage to even ask a goddess like Kali, who just goes around assassinating because she's such an angry goddess. You know, she's a warrior goddess. She just wants to see blood. And there are very rich poetic lines in these exchanges, which make for fantastic dialogue.
Okay, well, I would suggest that you explore and emphasize the cultural differences between the West and India. Because as I mentioned, I lived in India for 4 years, so I'm very aware. So one person that's good of handling that is the comedian Russell Peters. So Russell Peters is from Toronto, but he's, you know, like Catholic Indian, and he's one of the world's most famous comedians. And he does a lot of ethnic humor.
I know.
Yeah. So he actually did a TV series called The Mumbai Detective, I think. And the first episode was sort of lame, and then the last 3 episodes are perfect. So it took a little while for it to come up to speed, but it really, it ends with a bang. And it's definitely worthy of Russell Peters. So I'm going to just,
Is that very few, like Russell works with the broader stereotypes. I've heard him, I've seen his YouTube videos and stuff. He does a lot of stuff, but he talks about an India that belonged to another time. And this happens with a lot of people from here who migrate, live somewhere else. Whereas the writer, Tamanna, is negotiating New York and the Bombay of today, which even a Russell hasn't experienced because he's not living here anymore. So there is a lot of, you know, there's a lot of angst. Like you grew up being told that this is what India is, this is what Indianness means. And then you come home and then you find everything has changed.
Okay, so let's talk about the things going on in India today.
Yeah.
Since I lived there for 4 years and I only left 2 years ago, they're sort of fresh on my mind. Okay, so one thing would be arranged marriages,
which are now watering down. People are on dating apps and they want to have one night stands, and they're losing the sacredness of what used to be connected with the man-woman equation. Now it's a very consumer culture, and it's considered to be cool to be on chat with 50 people at a time. You know, so you've kind of lost the sacredness of what it used to be. Like the arranged marriage was a very pristine thing that's no longer there. And someone like Tamanna is coming back trying to find an anchor. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's a new work experience, she's looking for new anchors. That's her mission. And where the cultural clash is that she still lives in the India of 20 years ago that her mother told her about, where she's in India now and she's saying, wait a minute, where is that India? Okay, they have multiple stuff going on television. They're distracted. The kids are running around. They all want money. They want technology. There are all these goals that never used to bother kids earlier. Like, I have to go to foreign university or I'm not worth anything. So she's negotiating. And then secondly, the Hindi film used to be structured in a way that reflected the sacredness of our epics. So you always had a hero who would survive everything. But in today's cinema, the hero is an anti-hero. You know, he's capable of murder. He's capable of all kinds of horrible things. So all the things that she considered sacred about being in India are no longer around her. And that is her struggle. And that is where all these divine entities are giving her modern insights, which no writer in India has ever attempted to modernize Indian spiritual dialogue. No one's ever tried it in India.
Now, my writing instructor in Mumbai at Whistling Wood, he's the most famous screenwriting instructor in all of India. And he's written 10 big feature films. So he talks about he's got a class starting soon about the spiritual foundation of India and filmmaking. But okay, so let's, if we could, let's look at Ram Leela. Okay, so for people who don't know what Ram Leela is, it's a film that came about 6 years ago, and it's an Indian remake of Romeo and Juliet. It's actually one of my favorite films. Not everyone likes it. I love it. Okay, so what's clever about that film is that in Romeo and Juliet, what happens is that 400 years ago, it's not a class warfare, it's a caste system, which is actually unfamiliar to most Westerners. So in Italy 400 years ago, the Capulets and the Montagues are at war, but they're the same race. They're Italians, they're Catholic, and they speak the same language, but they're at war. What are they at war about? Who knows? But what it is, it's a caste system, not a class. It's a caste system. So that was what was so clever, among many things, about Ram Leela, which is a remake of Romeo and Juliet that takes place in modern day India, is that there's a caste war, and it's just as illogical as a caste battle in Romeo and Juliet, and it's the same story. Now, the main, besides the fact that Ram Leela takes place today, the big difference between it and Romeo and Juliet is that the lovers in Romeo and Juliet are young. Juliet's only about 12 or 13, and Romeo's about 18. But very cleverly, in Ram Leela, they're both young adults. They're both about 22 years old. And so there's a very different dynamic because they've got more moral, they're screwing up. It's not just bad things being done to the lovers. They're sort of sucked into the evil of their parents. So in Romeo and Juliet, there's even though it's a great play, there's a contrived death scene at the end, you know, with the priest, you know, telling him take this poison, doing this and that. But it's more of an adult conflict between Ram and Leela, between a Romeo and Juliet characters. So again, we've got a very famous Indian Bollywood film that's about the caste system. Okay, so then another thing about India, if you look at the film NH10, what is that about? Well, that's about honor killings. Okay, so the premise of the film is that you can be in Delhi and be the most modern westernized people in the world, and then you drive out of the city limits on National Highway 10, and all of a sudden you're in an evil world of honor killings. So again, that's an issue. Now, before I forget, you could have, let's say your protagonist is talking to an ancient god or goddess, and the ancient god or goddess, if they have wisdom, could be looking at modern problems in India from an ancient and perhaps wiser perspective.
Absolutely, that's what you see happening. And that's exactly the illumination that she's seeking. And so, she doesn't convey this to a lot of people because she doesn't think they're even seeking anymore. They're just jaded young people who have everything too soon in life. And her journey is, of course, to discover a new dimension to herself as a writer. But these conversations really help her to even cope with the world. So you could call them hallucination, you could treat it as a hallucination. And she sees them in their actual form, the form in which they're worshipped. A lot of my younger friends who read it, they're like, well, you can, disguise the God, and like you have a janitor playing, God in your movies. Why don't you just make them look like real people, but who are speaking like really like a god or a goddess? But I think there's a certain beauty even in keeping the mythical form. When they appear, and then you can make it very mystical, and when they disappear, there's a lot more visual special effects that you can try with those scenes. But those scenes are only part of the novel. There's a lot going on in the novel.
So let's talk about a couple more Bollywood film or Indian films. One would be Matchmove, which is it's sort of a science fiction film from about 2004, and it deals with the issue of female infanticide, which is still a big issue. So for the Western viewers, what happens is that in India today, it is when a woman is pregnant and she goes to the doctor, it's illegal to show the ultrasound to the mother or father. Why? Because sex-selective abortions are a big thing in India, even though it's illegal. So in the West, you know immediately what the gender of your fetus is, but in India they don't. And because of that, in India, there's a shortage of women. There's 10% too few women in India, which means you have an entire generation of men who are bachelors who will never get married, and they won't even be able to date because there's not enough women. So it really depends which part of India. So for example, Kerala, which is in the south, is sort of known for like not really having female infanticide. But other parts of India, it'll be very heavy, and so that changes the entire structure. So Matchboomi, it's not even that new a movie. Like I said, it's about 2004, but it's quite good. So another film in India that was very popular is called Three Idiots. So Three Idiots was the biggest hit in India up to the time. It's from the most famous novelist in India as well. So Three Idiots about a lot of stuff, but one of the major things is about an educational system, especially higher educational, that's too rigid and isn't creative enough. And again, India, if I remember correctly, is where the number 0 was invented.
Yes.
So India has a great deal of incredible accomplishments in the past and in the present and in the future. But the protagonist in Three Idiots is he's in an engineering school, which is similar to IIT. And so his teachers are very sort of anal compulsive, but even the protagonist finds out that there's certain things that the teachers know that he doesn't know. For example, with the whole issue with the space pen. So your protagonist can so now what is it about 9/11? 9/11 is actually what caused Battlestar Galactica to be written, because Battlestar Galactica is a clash between religions. And so what they did is that they did an allegory for it in Battlestar Galactica, where instead of being Muslims and Judeo-Christians, it's battle between polytheism and monotheism. So what is it, and this is sort of a trick question, what is it that your protagonist finds distressing about 9/11?
That it's like, you think you're in New York, it's impermeable, you have the best sort of quality of life, and you have a very fair system of justice, and she just thinks it's impermeable. It's just the most powerful country in the world. And then suddenly you see this catastrophe, and it's all man-made, and it's humanly possible to humble a country as great as America. And then she also realizes somewhere that within herself, she has been at war with the lack of a deeper value system. So she's doing a lot of lifestyle writing, and she goes for a lot of glamorous events and all. But it's a lot of exterior living. And so that's what then 9/11 happens. It's a bit like how the pandemic has exposed what humanity needs to reinvent. So for her, 9/11 as a writer becomes that center point. Like, I need to now walk away from all this excess. You know, everything in America, and I love the country, but there were things as an Indian that I also felt were very strange. Like, I could never finish my French fries because there were always big quantities. I could never finish my coffee because it was a larger than life cup of coffee. So you were surrounded by excess, right? So, I mean, these are subtler ideas. They're not things that I've put on like, you know, index cards and said that these are the themes and, you know, but it's very subtle, but it's there. So she leaves after 9/11 thinking, okay, maybe it's a little bit time for me to step out of this world of illusion, find something that I can chew on, and find something that nurtures me from deep within, which is really what the pandemic has also done to people.
Okay, so when you have very large portions in America, that's called supersize it.
No, but I'm talking about small sizes that I couldn't finish.
No, but I'm just saying is that when the portions are larger than a normal
Yeah.
person could or should eat,
Yeah.
it's called supersize in sort of a
Okay.
derogatory sense. So I've got a 3 or 4 minute clip that I'm going to show that's going to talk about some of the things you just talked about. It's from a film called Mr. Jones that just came out this year.
Uh-huh.
And you'll see when we get into it why I'm showing it. So um, bad things happen all the time. So when this pandemic hit, I was thinking about the fact that my mother was paralyzed with polio for a year in 1946. So
Okay.
that pandemic went for 50 years. And it's
Right.
quite different than the current pandemic because it hit the young and it
Yeah.
went for 50 years. And also, they weren't quite sure how it spread. And actually, you know, people wouldn't go into swimming pools back then, which was a good idea because, you know, polio, which there's now a vaccine for, is actually spread by feces. And so being a swimming pool with other young people is actually a fairly good way to get it. So then my grandfather,
Yeah.
he went through the Spanish flu in New York in 1918, which killed 50 million people. Millions of them just in India. So it spread all around the world. And so they're not quite sure. The Spanish flu did not come from Spain, of course. It probably came from China, and then Chinese workers came to the US, and then they came across, and then they went to Europe. Okay, so so then my mother and father, they went through Pearl Harbor. Okay, and so many bad things happened. So just like Cameron, when he made Titanic, is talking about the conceit of thinking, you know, too much trust in technology, there can be a problem in thinking that we're special. You know, bad things are always going to happen. So even though, like when George Orwell wrote Animal Farm, you know, he was very sick because he had tuberculosis and penicillin had just been invented and there was no mass production for it. So he had to spend all the money that he got from Animal Farm to pay for the penicillin. So now penicillin is dirt cheap. But even though most bacterial infections are quite easy for us to deal with, and we can even treat malaria, we live along long enough past the bacteria to now have to deal with the viruses. And we also have to deal with prions, which are bizarre. You know, that's mad cow disease. And then of course, you know, when people live longer like they're living now, then we've got the problems of large amount, you know, 25% of all people will go senile. And there's a very good film with Julie Christie called Away from Her, which deals with people with a very senile woman in a nursing home. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to show about 3 or 4 minutes from this film called Mr. Jones, and this is a true story. So I have to set it up. It takes place in 1935 in the Soviet Union. So there's 2 reporters, and so there's so Stalin has killed about murdered 10 million people in the Ukraine. But people don't know because, you know, so we've got 2 reporters in Moscow in 1935 arguing about what to do about it. Oh, and also in real life, one of the reporters involved got a Pulitzer Prize for reporting on the Soviet Union, but he lied. He pretended that there was no that no one was dying, and so the New York Times has been trying to give the Pulitzer back for like the last 50 years since we know that was false. But I'm going to do a little share here and play this clip.
Okay. So we switch off our cameras and microphones, right?
You don't have to do anything.
Okay.
Paul gave me this before he left. All the information is there, where he was going, and wanted me to have it in case he never made it back. Want some tea? Okay, what's the agenda now?
I don't have an agenda. Unless you call truth an agenda.
Yeah. Yes, but whose truth?
The truth, there is only one kind.
That's so naive.
Journalism is the noblest profession. You follow the facts, wherever it leads. You don't take sides.
My father is in the Foreign Service. I grew up mostly in Berlin. There's no place like it. The freedom, the art, the music, the culture. The Nazis are destroying everything so quickly, and I am afraid for... I'm afraid for my friends. They're arresting everyone in the Communist Party. We have to succeed. We don't have a choice.
You sound like you work for Stalin.
Not for Stalin. I believe in a movement that is bigger than any one person.
What if you're wrong?
That's just not an option, is it? Look, there are cycles of history just like there are cycles of nature. There's been nothing but war and depression, and now is the chance to rebuild, to fight for the future, and the future of the people, the real people, the workers, and that's what the Soviets are doing.
You believe in a state war before bullets and your friends back?
No, I believe that this movement is bigger than any of us.
Paul Klepp was a human sacrifice. Do you hear yourself? Tea? I'll go make us some more tea.
Was everyone able to see and hear that properly?
Yes.
Okay. So, well, so again, the four things that I mentioned that each film should contain: make a film about a relationship forming or ending between two or more vertebrates. So you've got two reporters, they're in a romantic relationship, so it's forming, but there's a clash of cultures that's getting in their way. So the next thing is make a film about a secret. So the big secret is that Stalin's just killed 10 million people. Make a film like clash of cultures or ideas. Well, what do you do about evil? So people know that Hitler could be evil. He's starting to get there, but the general population is suspicious of Hitler, but they're being lied to about Stalin. So in 1935, they don't really know what's going on, which is that Stalin and Hitler are both incredibly evil and will murder tens of millions of people. So what do you do? So the woman, she's worried, she's more worried about the bad things happening to Germany. So for example, when Sanjita is talking about how wonderful things were in New York in 2001 and how bad they got, well, that's what it was like in Germany. Now, Germany had tough times because the depression was extremely bad in Germany after World War I, very bad. And that actually sort of led to World War II, but there was also a great deal of sophistication in Germany that collapsed at that point. And then, of course, obviously, the Soviet Union had its own problems. So the third thing that you want to do is in a film is make a film about a clash of cultures or ideas, which you definitely have in this. And then if you watch the entire film of Mr. Jones, make a film which makes the audience cry, well, Mr. Jones definitely does. Mr. Jones is available on streaming from Amazon Prime. I'm not sure if there's any other sources, but I just watched it last week, and the film's only a few months old, so it's extremely good. Also, they have an actor playing George Orwell, so he actually, George Orwell's character doesn't have a huge part in the film, but it's quite interesting. They got an actor who just looked like the real George Orwell. So tell me a little bit about, so right here we have sort of I won't say a clash between you and me, but the thing is that when things fall apart, I'm not surprised, but you were surprised that things fell apart in New York, but I've seen a lot of things fall apart.
Right.
Life, there's a thin line between civilization and savagery, and the barbarians are always at the gate.
Right.
Another really good example of the barbarians at the gate is, most people know the film Slumdog Millionaire,
Yeah.
which is based on true events. So Slumdog Millionaire, it's actually a British film from 2008. It won an Oscar for Best Picture. And what it talks about, I'm going to oversimplify it, is for various reasons, a lot of Hindus hate the Muslims in India. So Muslims in many parts of the world are considered to be fanatical and unruly, but in India, Muslims, who are about 10% of the population, are actually generally quite well behaved and really nice intellectual people. But there have been some very noticeable genocides. Indians can get a little intense about their religion, especially, that there was that Khan film, was it PK? I can't remember. Anyway, they can get very intense about it. So that film has a very definite clash of cultures and ideas. So even though India is a very modern, civilized place in many ways, in other ways, there's always emotionalism and genocide on people's minds. And of course, Slumdog Millionaire, most of the events take place in Juhu. So Juhu is sort of like the Malibu of India. It's in Mumbai, but the southern end of this place by the ocean where all the movie stars live are the Juhu slums. And, like really there were huge riots and thousands of people massacred, as shown in Slumdog Millionaire. So it could be interesting in your story if, some of the Greek gods were very petty, and perhaps some of the gods in the Indian stories can be petty and others are very wise. And so you can have a love triangle because you can have conflicts between different gods. So in Christianity, there's a conflict that goes on because God made the devil. But the devil is always fighting God, but and eventually the devil's going to lose, but it's quite a nice ride while it lasts. There's one particular film about Christ that I saw recently with Jeremy Sisto. It was from about 20 years ago, and the devil is talking to Christ all the time. It's very interesting. He's sort of this very clever Eurotrash devil, whereas in other films about Christ, the interactions between the devil and Christ are, very minimal. So tell me a little bit more about how you felt about 9/11 in New York.
Me personally?
Yes. You
I-
or your protagonist, either way.
So my protagonist just wondered like whereas earlier everyone was a citizen of that city because it had such a multicultural fabric, but what she sensed is that after 9/11, people of color, people of other racial backgrounds may be singled out. It wasn't something that was written in like blood or anything, but she just had a sense that she may not feel as much a part of that fabric as she used to before. And that's the real fallout of 9/11 that affected Indians, Pakistanis, turban people like the Sikhs, the Punjabis from the north. Like I interviewed a billionaire who was a Sikh turban. You must have heard of the Chakwal family. They run a hotel chain in New York in America, very wealthy family. And his father actually paid for a New York Times commercial, the entire page, explaining that the Sikh Punjabis are not the Taliban. So basically, she realized that now the fabric and the psychology of the people of New York will be suspicious and will be a lot more careful about people who don't seem, from the earth and the soil of America. And that's one of the reasons she said maybe it's a good time to go home now. It's just sometimes you get tired. Like if you read Priyanka Chopra's story, she grew up with a lot of racism in Midwest America. And
Just be careful of the noise, please.
after a point, she couldn't handle it because she was only a teenager. She was only in her formative years. So she decided, okay, I know my parents live in a small village like Bareilly in India. I've just been so knocked around with racism that I need to head back and I need to heal myself. So there were different reasons why it was 9/11 was the external trigger, but also within her, there were a lot of unanswered questions. And America is a happy society as long as you're earning well, you're living well. You can lead a pretty uncomplicated life. People are happy. It's not a society that's overly given to intellectualizing everything on a day-to-day basis. But if you go back into your epics and you go into your mythology, you'll realize that there is so much to explore and so much knowledge and wisdom that lies in your own country that you don't ever spend your life looking at. So there were all these triggers that were pushing her into, you need to go home, you need to go home, you need to go home. But then the irony and the big theme of the story is that when she comes home, the global village has entered. So it's not a pristine home that she was expecting with the same pristine values and the same sort of belief in marriage and the same kind of heroes in the movies who never die. You know what I'm talking about? So there's clash of culture and ideas between her expectations and what she actually discovers when she gets back to Bombay. And Bombay has always been very imitative of everything that's going on around the world. So if there's any one city that can actually be way more complex to understand, it is Bombay, because there are many Indias living within one city. Like you explained, there's a slum India, this half or 60% of the workers of the city live in the slums. But also what you said about the religious divide. So Bombay's always been driven by material values. So everyone wants to survive and do well. And they come here because they want to grow financially. So it's like the city of the great Indian dream. Religion is a game played by the politicians. It's not so intrinsic to the people of Bombay, from what I know and what I witnessed of the riots. A lot of it was instigated by the vote agenda, building your vote bank. They know they're majority Hindus. Let the Hindus fight the Muslims. That way we win. It's divide and rule. So that's a whole different. So in my story, it's a lot more of, the themes are a lot more about where is home? Is home a place within you? Home has changed so much. Is it really any different from New York? Those are the kind of questions that she has to address.
So the message you're saying about the turbans is don't judge a book by its cover. For example,
which is what we started getting worried about, that if that starts to happen, then New York will not be the global melting pot that it was before 9/11, because people have lost faith. They've lost faith, and that's why Trump is in power. So the beginning of that was 9/11.
So, by the way, one of our guests today is a Sikh, Ajit. So I know all about turbans. Hi, Ajit. Yeah, so Ajit and I hung out quite a bit in Mumbai, and his cat and my cat email frequently.
Okay.
That's a joke. Anyway, but don't judge a book by its cover is quite important. There's one book I read that's quite interesting after 9/11, which was written by Osama bin Laden's sister-in-law.
Oh, wow.
Okay, her name is Carmen bin Laden. So I think she's half Iranian, half Swiss. Anyway, her book was extremely interesting. And again, it's on Kindle and paperback, but you, when the first, as soon as she saw the World Trade Centers falling down, she said, oh, my brother-in-laws did that.
Ah.
But she's got a lot more to say about it. Actually, there's a big clash of cultures and ideas in that. So she's not from Saudi Arabia, so she marries into the bin Laden family. And so when the Osama brothers are outside of Saudi Arabia, they're very Western and decadent. But when they come back to Saudi Arabia, it's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And they became very domineering and control freaks and the like. So there are many, many interesting things in Carmen bin Laden's autobiography.
What's it called again?
I think it's called Inside the Kingdom.
Okay. I'll try and
but
look
in any case, that's Carmen bin Laden. I mean, she's got the same last name as Osama bin Laden. So Osama bin Laden was relatively secular, but he did become born again at a certain point, and then he became fairly fanatical. Of course, he had an engineering degree, so he's very modern in some ways. So anyway, the conversion, so racism is always a problem. So, for example, one thing that's interesting in America is that people in America might object to people from Latin America coming in, mainly because there's a very high murder rate. Like the murder rate in Mexico is, 1,000 times, is 10 times higher than it is in the U.S. But then you've got a contradictory thing where Cubans are seen very differently in America. Cubans are heroes, but they're all Hispanic. So Cubans, there's 2 or 3 U.S. senators who are Cuban. Cubans, up until recently, were allowed to come to America and to Miami without any blockage and the welcome arms. And so so Cubans are heroes in America, whereas Hispanics from another part of South America might be seen differently. And there's a lot of variations in Latin America with different cultures. I mean, even the Spanish spoken in Spain is somewhat different than that in South America. I mean, they can understand one another, but there are differences. So I'd like to open this up for questions, because I promised that this would only be about 70 minutes long. This meeting ended up being extremely different than I planned, because there were a couple of student films that I wanted to show, but the discussion with Sanjita was extremely useful. So what I'd like to do is to open it up to questions for a few minutes, and then I'm going to end up with one of my favorite songs, music video. So it'll take 3 minutes to watch. It's called Classical Gas. But just in general, does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, so I'm planning on uploading this to YouTube soon if the recording is successful. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this out with a 3-minute classic song and video. So I'm going to get this going for you. It's called Classical Gas. So let me know if there's any more questions. If not, we can close this meeting out in a minute or two. Any more questions or comments? Okay, so what
Michael, sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
So I was wondering that, like, in another class, that you could maybe go into more detail about the process of the script when you're writing a screenplay for like a film versus say, like, a web series or a a TV show, and how how do you sort of lay out the skeletons for both of those sort of,
I'm going to talk about that now. So because it'll only take a minute. So when I was in film school, we had a writing instructor, and he worked on lots of TV series. And so he would teach us how to write feature films that were 2 hours long, beginning, middle, and end. First act 30 minutes, second act 60, the third 30. So what happens at the end of the feature film is generally all of the problems with the character are fixed by the end of the 2 hours. Now there's exceptions with, Godfather actually has a degenerative ending, but most films, there's a full character arc. So what happens is the character arc that happens in a feature film in 2 hours can take 2 or 3 seasons. So it gets really dragged out. And in some ways I said, oh, that's sort of cheating. Like, why can't they just get it over with and get the character arc done? But so TV series, the really good ones, will have many, many characters. So one character arc will be starting, one will be ending. Characters will move forward, so go backwards, especially if you see a show like Ozark. So the big thing is, that's a big subject, what you're asking about, Sheena. But the point is that the character arcs, there's multiple character arcs, and they get stretched out over years.
Right. So I have a feeling that if you read this novel, Bollywood on the Bend, I don't know if you'd be inspired to do something like a web series, but maybe I need a mentor, because I would love to make it into a web series. It's very complex. It's got many characters, many subplots,
Oh, I'd be happy to help you.
Great.
But I have to read the book first. But like I said, I've already downloaded the Kindle version of it.
Yeah. So we'll be in touch. I'll try and get your email ID from Sheena.
And so if anyone can send me questions on email. I'm just going to say it out loud, but it's Michael Karp, vfx@gmail.com. Michael, and then my last name is Karp, and the letters VFX for visual effects. Michael Karp, VFX. But anyway, Sheena or I, one way or the other, I can send you any of the material that we've looked at, or links, and on the YouTube, tomorrow I'll have all the links ready for you.
So I sent across the links for the book you mentioned, My Life in Saudi Arabia, that Inside the Kingdom by Carmen Bin Laden, and Battlestar Galactica, that was a 2004 to 2009 TV series, which I also sent.
And Save the Cat is an excellent introductory book to screenwriting.
Okay,
and there's actually 3 or 4 books in the series, but just start with the first one, Save the Cat.
Okay. Great.
I have 2 questions, if I may.
Yes, Peter.
If I can be heard. The first is quick, which is the conversation that you were having with Sanjita was relating the principles you're talking about with the book. Can these principles also relate to shorts, like let's say a 3 to 5 minute story, a video told through video, or is it like more for long form, like TV shows or movies?
To answer that question, what we did today was completely different than what I planned. What I was planning on doing is I have 2 student films that my students made some years ago that each are about 7 minutes long. They had beginning, middle, and ends all in 7 minutes. So I have to show those films at another time, although I can actually link them to you. But you can definitely have a full story in 7 minutes with beginning, middle, and end. It gets a little bit deeper generally with a longer length. But and you can actually do a full beginning, middle, and end with a 3-minute film. You'd be amazed.
Excellent. And I don't know if this is a longer question, so it doesn't have to be answered now, but are you familiar with Dan Harmon's story circle, and how does this mesh with these principles, or is that different?
Okay, just help me. I'm not familiar with them. Just give me the name again so I can.
Dan Harmon, D-A-N, Harmon, H-A-R-M-O-N. He's the creator of Community and Rick and Morty, and he has this famous story circle.
Okay, I see it here on Google. I'm going to study it and get back to you next week.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone? Okay, so thank you, everyone. Be sure to email me or anyone else if you've got questions. And I'm very happy that this worked out so well, and that also that we're ending on time. Very important. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.